Your brother's soul is mine.
Hey, dreadlocks. Where the bomb buck that on?
Harry tells me you're quite the science whiz, you know.
We had to go.
Nobody gets that.
So you did it while you're putting your clothes back on, dear.
Your brother's soul.
Real slick how mostly put it in my pocket.
Shut up! Isn't it in your pocket, is it, son?
What's up? And welcome back to another episode of Star Explains / Reviews. So, this movie right here, I hadn't seen in so long, and when I watched it again, I was like, damn, that's crazy. Let me give a little background about it. So, when you're a child, you know, you hang out with your mom and your dad. And when your mom goes off to the store or work, you're hanging out with your dad. So I remember sitting with my dad and him watching this movie. And like, I didn't know what the hell was going on, but I know the movie gave me a nightmare when I was younger. And that movie was Miracle Mile. Why this movie gave me a nightmare when I was younger, I don't know. Maybe it was just, you know, everybody having that sense of dread. But this one is a wild one, man. And the thing is, it's like non-stop action from go. Like, there's no wasted anything in this movie. Like, watching it again, I see why my dad loved this movie. So this one holds a special place in my heart. Hopefully you enjoy, and yeah, let's get to it. Also, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Okay, so this is a Kino Lorber MGM, man, shout out to MGM, and a Hemdale joint. The movie starts off overlooking the beautiful Los Angeles skyline and a specific neighborhood, the one in which the movie is titled after, Miracle Mile. Miracle Mile is a neighborhood in Los Angeles, California that contains a stretch of Wilshire Boulevard known as Museum Row. So shout out to Los Angeles, not the Dodgers though, but shout out to Los Angeles. We see our main character, he is overlooking the city playing his trombone. And he's like, love can surely spin your head around, which is facts. Love can do that. When you're in love, you do all sorts of crazy things. We've all been there. We see our main character is Anthony Edwards. Man, shout out to Anthony Edwards, man. He was also in Top Gun. He was Goose. He was in my favorite show. This show got me through so much hard time, ER. Bro, him, fucking George Clooney, them dudes really got me through like both of my breakups. So shout out to Anthony Edwards and George Clooney, ER, John Carter, old dude from Soul Glow, man. Shout out to them. Shout out to ER. Anyway, the movie transitions to a museum and there's a video playing. And the video is basically explaining how all life comes from star stuff. That it started off with the Big Bang, and from the Big Bang, it goes through the different evolutionary steps all the way to humanity. After it gets all the way to humanity, Harry's like, and it took me 30 years to find love. Now, at this point, our main character, Harry, hasn't met old girl yet. So he's just kind of walking around the museum, you know, trying to kill time before he goes and does his show later. So after Harry walks off, we see his love interest. Her name is Julie Peters. And y'all might remember her. Her name is Mare Winningham. And you know what I fucking realized when I was looking this shit up? When I was looking her up, her and him, they married in real life. Anthony Edwards and Mare Winningham is married in real life. Man, shout out to them for actually being a married couple. She was in another show that I watched called The Outsider. That show came on HBO Max. She was also in Under the Dome as well. I love my Stephen King, so shout out to Stephen King. And she was in American Horror Story. So continuing on, we see her walk past Harry, and Harry kind of takes a notice to her. Like, wow, she's looking kind of good, you know? And it's the same thing for her. She kind of sees him walk past and she's like, wow, he's not bad looking, you know? This is kind of good. And after they play around a little bit with, you know, looking at each other and not wanting to go and say anything to each other, like, I know I did that personally in high school. I wouldn't know that somebody had a crush on me, but I didn't know it then. But now I'm like, the older I got, I would recognize it. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what they're doing. They're kind of looking at each other and they're like, should I say something? Shouldn't I say something? Should I say something or shouldn't I say something? And they never say anything, and she leaves, and Harry's like, damn, I missed my moment. So Harry's standing outside and he's smoking a cigarette. He's thinking about how he missed his moment, and he's overlooking the tar pits. He finishes up his cigarette and he pulls out this crystal that he bought inside the museum, and he starts to play with it and shine it on his hand a little bit. And Julie comes walking up, and Julie kind of leans over the railing and she's like, hey. He's like, hey. So they get to talking, you know, then they start discovering that they have a lot of things in common. And then it transitions to them out at lunch, and they're looking at the lobsters, and they're like, yo, I couldn't eat none of these lobsters, man. Just let them go. He like, how much is it for you to take them back to Maine and let them go free? And the dude, he like $1,200. And Harry like, what? I ain't got that much. So he buys a couple of the lobsters, and him and Julie, they go to the pier and release them in the water. Now, me personally, I don't get why people from California or who live in California do this shit. Like, it happened on Deuce Bigelow too. They released the fish into the water, and it's like two different it's two different types of salt water. You know what I'm saying? Like, that animal is probably gonna die in the water and shit. So Harry and Julie are kicking it. They even end up going to a little amusement park and hopping on the Ferris wheel. After that, Harry's like, she even came to my concert with me and brought her granddad. And I'm like, yo, that's kind of dope. You know, you see Harry playing his trombone and she's all smiling and happy and stuff like that, and they're just having a good time together. So next they get on the trolley and head back towards her grandfather's house, and this whole time Harry is like, he's thinking about how much he really likes this girl. He's like, you know what, I might just give up the traveling and the music and just go be a music teacher somewhere and see if I can move in her building. So they get to her grandfather's high-rise complex. Her grandfather is like, anybody want any tube steaks? Harry like, for sure. Now, for those who don't know, a tube steak is a hot dog. It's like a normal hot dog. You get it from the street corner, you know, whatever. It's a hot dog. Put chili, cheese, and onions on it. Harry likes his with mustard and sauerkraut. So while the grandfather is getting the hot dogs, Harry and Julie walk off and they talk a little bit more. And boom, here is Julie's grandmother. And she's like, hey, Julie, who's your friend? You gonna introduce us? And she's like, yeah, sure, grandma. This is my grandma. And the whole time she's looking over her shoulder, hoping that her grandfather does not see them. That way the grandmother doesn't get upset. But unfortunately, that's exactly what happens. The grandmother sees the grandfather and she's like, okay, yeah, I'll see you later. And she walks away. Harry's like, yo, what's going on? She's like, they haven't spoken in over 15 years. Harry's like, damn, that was some kind of fight. And she's like, yeah, they don't even know what it's about anymore. Just they have fucking pride. They don't want to fucking let it go. And Julie's like, come on, let's go check on my granddad. So they walk off and go check on the granddad. So then it transitions to Harry walking Julie to her job, and he's like, well, shit, I might as well come in and chill out with you for a little bit. And she's like, what, you watch me work? Nah, go to your hotel, clean your spit valve, and take a nap, because you're gonna need all the energy you can get for later on the night. He's like, oh, okay, bet. So they have their first kiss, and it's like a beautiful little background and all that, man. Shout out to the visuals in this movie. And Harry's like, damn, well, might as well go ahead and take a nap. So Harry walks off and he gets back to his hotel, and he's standing over the balcony smoking a cigarette. But he doesn't even fucking smoke the cigarette. He like lights it up, take one puff, and then flicks that shit away. Like, look at this shit. While Harry was smoking that cigarette, that little puff. It was a lady down there on the street feeding, you know, the birds some bread and shit. And after Harry walks off, we see that one of those fucking pigeons or birds or whatever, it picked up his cigarette and took it back to his nest. And guess where the fucking bird's nest is? It's on his fucking building. And it's already on the fucking wires and shit. Like, the nest is right there on the wires. But anyway, Harry goes and he sits on the bed and he sets an alarm to make sure he gets up at 12 o'clock to go meet Julie. You know, he want to be there at 12:15, so he makes sure he sets his alarm.
Now, again, back in the 80s, they didn't have everything battery powered. They didn't have cell phones, stuff like that. So if you look at the cord hanging off of Harry's alarm clock, you will see that it's plugged into the wall. So when Harry lays down and goes to sleep, the bird's nest catches on fire, and unfortunately, the power goes out in his building. Now, Harry is knocked out. He don't know none of this. 12:16 comes around, and Julie steps out of her job, and she's looking around for Harry. She's like, okay, well, maybe he's just a little bit late. But then time goes on, and it's 1:05, and she's like, nah, I know he didn't. He ain't stand me up. Then she goes and she tries to call his hotel and gets no answer. And she like, damn, he done stood me up. But Harry didn't really stand her up. We know the power was out in his hotel, or his hotel period. After about an hour or so, the power comes back on in Harry's hotel room. And during this time, Julie gets home and she's talking to her grandmother, and she's like, I can't believe he stood me up and shit. And she like, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna take a volume and get some sleep. So that's what she does. She goes to sleep. It switches back over to Harry, and his clock is still set to the same time. So when he gets up because his alarm goes off, he looks over at the clock and he's like, oh, it's only 11:15, 12 o'clock, whatever time. My time may be off, but he's like, I still got enough time to make it there. So he gets up and he starts to get dressed, and he turns on the TV. He's cycling through the channels, and again, it's the 80s, so you know they ain't had that much channels and shit like that. So he finally comes upon like a weather channel, and he sees the time on the weather channel. He's like, oh shit, how the fuck? And he looks back at the clock. He like, oh fuck. So then he jumps in his car and he's driving towards Julie's job and shit. So Harry pulls up to the diner, and something fucking weird as hell happens. Like, and please, if somebody in my community lives in LA or Los Angeles, the West Coast, whatever, please tell me if this shit happens for real. He hits the fucking tree and fucking rats fall out the tree. Like, what the fuck? Like, is that fucking normal? I'm like baffled right now. I don't understand how the fuck that would happen. Like, these motherfuckers crawling trees and shit while Harry is, I guess, smacking them rats off the hood of his car. We see two street sweepers pulling in and a cab, and this homeless guy that's sitting over here leaning against a fire hydrant, he's gonna start fucking spazzing out on the fucking, I don't know if I can use spaz out, but he starts tripping on the fucking street sweepers.
Backstroking a vat of dragon piss for all I care about it, man. Not me, not Spongy.
Fuck it, you know what, man?
Niggas said my car's the same color as fluoride. What the fuck color is fluoride?
Harry ain't even trying to beef with the dude, but look at the time. It's currently 3:55. So our man Harry, he's like almost 4 hours late and shit. That's crazy though. And as he's walking, he sees the phone booth is ringing. Now, again, for our younger audience, phone booths are phones. They're like placed on the corners strategically. So if you know you got to use the phone while you're out walking because cell phones didn't exist, and if they did exist, they were expensive or the size of briefcases, you had to use a phone booth. Once Harry gets into the diner, he sees one of Julie's friends and co-workers, and he walks over to her and he's like, hey, where's Julie at? And she's like, you're late, homeboy. He's like, come on now, the power went out at the hotel. I had no idea. And she like, well, I don't know what to tell you. She left. And he's like, well, can I have her phone number? Can you give me her number? And she like, it's in the phone book under Julie Peters. So
he goes to head back outside and she's like, do you want to order anything? And he says gyro and eggs, which, I mean, I guess, you know, people in California eat gyro and eggs together. While Harry heads outside to give Julie a call, we see the two guys who were driving the street sweepers coming in, and they're talking about this woman named Landa and how beautiful she is and how they wish that, you know, she would just hold them, stuff like that. And next we see Landa come in, and she's, you know, like a stockbroker, or she's somebody who works in the government or something. She knows a lot of important people. And Landa sits down, and the cook comes from the back and greets her, and Landa opens her briefcase up, and we see this book, and the book is How to Read Gravity's Rainbow. And if you don't know about Gravity's Rainbow is what they say is one of the most hardest books ever to read, and that it's very confusing and it's just hard to kind of navigate around. And I even did a little research on Gravity's Rainbow, and it's basically about a guy who was brainwashed by the government to become turned on every time he would see or think of a rocket, something like that. Very weird, but yeah, that's Gravity's Rainbow. And don't quote me 100% to it. Like, I didn't read the book. I basically listened to like maybe a 5-minute synopsis of it, and yeah. He goes outside and he gives her a call. He's like, hey, sorry I missed our date. If you're still up, we can go out and we can get some champagne breakfast, and, you know, we could just kick it and have a good time. If not, then just call me tomorrow when you get up. He hangs up the phone, and then he goes and he purchases a newspaper. While he's purchasing the newspaper, the phone starts to ring again, and he's like, oh shit, that might be her. She might be calling back. He picks up the phone, and the voice on the other line just starts going.
It's happening. I can't believe it, but we're locked into it. 50 minutes and counting. Christ, I just can't take it. I can't fucking take it.
Harry's like, hold on, what? Slow down. I don't understand what's going on. And the guy is like explaining that the United States shot their missiles off to Russia, and that Russia was going to retaliatory strike in an hour and 10 minutes. And they fired all of their nuclear weapons. So that means they're basically ending the world. And Harry's like, what the fuck? And while Harry is on the phone with the guy named Chip, a group of soldiers enter the room, and they start questioning Chip. And they're like, what are you doing on the phone? Who are you talking to? He was like, oh, I was just running a test on the phone line, sir. Nothing's going on. And the soldiers shoot Chip. Then they pick up the phone and they ask Harry,
who are you?
Who am I? Listen, I'm just a guy who picked up the phone.
Forget everything you just heard and go back to sleep.
After they hang up the phone, Harry starts yelling. He's like, yo, like, is this real? He steps outside the phone booth, and he's still trying to gather his thoughts. And he looks up at the clock, and he's like, nah, it gotta be a prank. It gotta be a prank. He goes to walk back into the diner and walks right into the glass and like smashes his nose like right into the glass, which, you know, I guess that's common. Okay, from this point, shit is about to move crazy fast. But this is your daily reminder to go drink some fucking water. So pause the video right here and go drink some water before we get into it. So Harry, still in shock, heads back into the diner and sits down, and he's kind of looking around at the people, and he's like, yo, did what happened really happen? And his nose starts to bleed, all in his eggs. So he grabs the tissue and he wipes his nose, and he's still kind of looking around at everybody. And the waitress notices him, and she's like, let me get him some coffee. So she takes some coffee over to him, and he grabs her arm holding the pot, and he's like, could you leave this here? And he takes the coffee and he pours the whole thing of cream inside of the coffee. And while he's doing that, the waitress, she goes over to the cook, and she's like, yo, that dude just grabbed me. Harry drinks the coffee thinking it'll help wake him up, and burns his damn mouth. And the cook is being explained to by the waitress that he grabbed her and what exactly happened. Harry looks over at the first two customers, and he asked them, hey, did any of you guys know anybody named Chip? And the flight attendant says the most awkward thing in the world. Like, why would you even say something? You don't know nobody named Chip.
I had an uncle named Chet.
She said the wrong answer with so much motherfucking confidence. Harry is trying to ask the other patrons about Chip and he's being ignored, so he yells at him. And the cook comes up and he's like, hey. And Harry's like, no, I gotta find this out. Does anybody have a son named Chip? The other patrons look at Harry and he's like, look, somebody called on the phone out there and they basically told me that the world is gonna end. They told me
Locked in. Thor Arthur 66 DDZ.
Wait a minute.
and the cook looks over at Landa and sees a worried look on her face. And he's like, bro, are you fucking serious right now? All the other patrons are like, yo, this is a fucking joke. I know it is. It's a lot of actors who ain't got nothing else better to do in the middle of the night than play on the damn phone. The cook is looking at Landa and Landa's on the phone trying to get in contact with people. She's like, hey, is the senator in? Hey, is this person in? And the cook's like, Landa, when you told me that if it was to happen, you told me that we would have to strike first, right? And she's like, yeah, Fred, I know. The person on the phone gets back to Landa and tells her that the governor, senator, everybody has left and they're heading to the extreme southern hemisphere. The cook is like, what? And jumps up and grabs his gun and shoots out the window and then aims the gun at Harry. And he's like, if you lying, you better tell me the truth right now. And everybody inside of the cafe is like, hey man, he's just a drunk or something. Just let him go. He's like, no, fuck that. If you're lying, you better tell me right now. And Harry's like, man, it's the truth. Fred jumps off the counter and he yells for Joe to go get the truck. Landa calls Harry over and she's like, now explain to me everything that happened and everything that he said to you one more time. While he's explaining everything, Frank comes out the back with cans and he's like, we need more cans. We got to get as many cans as we can and we got to make our way to the mountains. Landa starts talking to the other patrons and she says, I can't get anybody on the phone. So I'm starting to think this is actually real. Landa heads outside along with everybody else and she looks up at the Mutual Life building while she's making preparations and making calls. And she's like, set up a airport shuttle from the Mutual Life building. Harry reaches out to Julie's coworker and he's like, hey, I need to know where she lives at. Can you give me any information about her? Julie's coworker got a whole armful of cans and she's like, man, just let me go. But she does give him the address. Meanwhile, Landa and everybody else, they get on the van and they're discussing all places where they can go to survive the nuclear fallout. And Landa's like, we got to go to Antarctica. There's fresh ice that can supply humans for centuries if need be. So that's where we're going, which Antarctica is a great place to go, in my opinion. I mean, you do got the ice and it is a desert. It doesn't really like rain there that often, but it's a desert and it's on a glacier. So while that's going on, we see Joe talking to Frank about him going to go pick up somebody, and Frank's like, man, we can't do it. We strapped for time already. While he's doing that, we switch back to the van and Landa is telling everybody to make a list of important people that they want to bring along, like scientists, doctors, important people. Now these two fools, they start naming off like basketball head coaches and stuff like that. Why? I don't know. But it switches over to Joe and Joe is stealing Harry's car while Harry is on the phone talking to Julie's grandfather, trying to get him to go across and wake everybody up so that they can all go together. It switches back over to Landa and Landa is on the phone with Carl Sagan telling him what's going on. Joe takes Harry's car and Harry's like, oh no, fuck, what am I gonna do? So he runs back to Frank and he's like, hey, can we swing past and pick up Julie? Frank's like, yeah, sure, man, come on, let's go. So they all hop in the van, but the van damn near leaves Harry, so he gotta fucking run after the van and somebody helps him get inside of it. So Harry's looking back out on the street and he's just wondering, damn, is this still just a dream? We see Landa, she's on the phone and she's making preparations. She's calling people, telling them to bring goose down coats, bring guns, bring ammunition, bring more food, supplies, stuff like that. Time progresses a little bit and while they're driving, Harry notices that, hey, we should have been by Julie's building already. So Harry gets up and he goes to Frank. And he's like, hey, I thought we were gonna stop and get Julie. And Frank's like, I lied. And Harry's like, man, nah, we gotta stop and we gotta go get Julie. Turn around now. Frank says, we're already strapped for time. And he says,
The truck. Fuck you.
Harry!
Let me.
after Harry pulls a gun on him. He told that man like Patterson told the goddamn guy to keep sending the fucking train.
So we got cops on the tracks down there.
Send it through. Nothing stops the money train.
Fred is like, hey, look, I'm gonna slow down on this on-ramp and you can jump off there. And Harry's like, all right, fine, I ain't got no choice. So Landa tells him there'll be a helicopter on the Mutual Life building as a shuttle. You gotta make it there. Harry goes and he looks at the back out the road on the on-ramp and then he jumps off. Once Harry jumps off, he hits his head and he kind of just lays there for a minute. And he's looking and he's like, yo, is this just a dream? He picks up the gun and he fires the gun in the air. And like it startles him and he's like, damn, it's not a dream. While Harry is standing at the top of this on-ramp, a car comes and this car does the most smoothest stop I'd ever seen. Like, check this shit out. Stop! The whole trunk spills open and we see who's driving the car, and it's fucking Bubba from Forrest Gump. Man, shout out to Bubba from Forrest Gump. I ain't gonna go into too much detail about him. I told y'all everybody gets two. So Harry jumps into the car with him and he's like, yo, I need you to take me to this location. And he's like, okay, that's fine, just don't shoot me. And he's like, don't worry, you're gonna be one of the lucky ones. And he's like, well, what's the Harry? So they're driving along and he's like, man, I don't even know if I got enough gas to make it there. Shit, I barely had enough to get home. He's like, okay, stop at that gas station over there. So they pull into this gas station and the gas station is just for cabs. And Harry's like, put $20 in the gas tank, enough to get us there and get us to the airport, and then we out. While Bubba is looking for a way to pump the gas because he's at a cab gas depot, Harry goes and makes a phone call to Ivan and he's just trying to check and make sure that Ivan's up and he can't reach him, so he leaves a voicemail. While he's doing that, the person who owns the cab gasoline hub comes out and has a shotgun and he's like, hey boy, what you doing here? And he's like, hey man, I ain't even want to be here. This guy told me to get some gas. He'll give you $50 if you give him some gas. He's like, all right, where he at? Harry walks over and he's like, hey, what's going on, man? He's like, you want some gas? It's gonna be $50. So he's like, all right. Harry gives him $50 and he's like, go ahead and start pumping. Bubba starts pumping the gas. As Bubba's pumping the gas, two police officers pull up and the police officers come and they see the guy holding the shotgun and they're like, hey, you get down on the ground. And Bubba, he goes into this whole story. He's like, get him, officers. He been trying to rob me all week. And the guy's like, he's lying, officers. You know you lying. Stop lying. Bubba picks up the gasoline pump and sprays it on the cops. And then one of the stupid ass cops does the dumbest thing in the fucking world, and she shoots in the air and lights herself on fire. Her partner comes rushing over to try to put the fire out on her, and because he has gasoline on him, he catches on fire as well. Harry jumps in the cop's car through this whole thing and he pulls off in a cop car. And while he's driving down the street, he sees Bubba and he's like, man, get in. Bubba jumps in and he's like, man, I had to do it. I had no choice. They didn't have to shoot the damn gun off though. While they're riding down the street, Harry picks up the police radio and he asks, has the evacuation started yet? And they're like, what evacuations? He's talking about for the clouds. Have the clouds came yet? And Bubba's listening to this whole thing and he's like, bro, what are you talking about? Are you talking about a meltdown? Like a nuclear meltdown? Harry says, yeah, I'm talking about a nuclear meltdown, not really wanting to tell too much information. Harry gatekeeping and shit. So they reach Julie's apartment and Bubba's like, hey man, my sister, we gotta go get my sister. And Harry's like, just give me 4 minutes and I'll be back, okay? I'm not gonna be gone long. Harry darts up the stairs because he takes the long way for some odd reason. Harry's going up the stairs and he finally gets to Julie's apartment. He knocks on it first, but nobody answers. So he busts the door in. Because he busts the door in, Julie's grandmother is there with the shotgun. And she like, yo, what the fuck you doing in my house? Boy, I just met you today. Harry grabs the gun and he's like, look, Los Angeles is about to become a desert again. We gotta get out of here. So sensing the urgency, the grandmother tells him where Julie is and that she sleeps. She just took a Valium. While Harry is checking on Julie, Bubba hits the horn and he's like, hey man, come on, we gotta go. And Harry's like, just give me 1 more minute, I'm coming now. Bubba says, fuck that. He gets in the car, he pulls off. He like, man, I got to go. I gotta go get my sister. The grandmother is trying to call the grandfather on the phone, but he doesn't answer. So the grandmother, Julie, who's still sleeping, and Harry all hop in the elevator and head down. Once they get down to the lobby, the grandfather sees the grandmother and they start smiling and they have to embrace each other because, you know, this may be their last moments together. Harry's like, come on, we gotta go, y'all. They're like, go ahead, we'll get the car and we'll meet you down there. Harry's like, okay, it's the Mutual Life building. And him and Julie head out the front door. As him and Julie are heading throughout the front door and on their way down the street, crossing through parks to make it to the building. Julie starts to wake up and she's like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing here? And he's like, hey, nothing much, just hanging around. And she's like, you stood me up. And he tells her what happened as far as like the power going out in his hotel. And she's like, oh, okay, it could happen. So that's kind of cool for her, you know what I'm saying? Anyway, once they get close to the building, she's like, hey, my legs are starting to hurt in this thing. Can you help me out? So he helps her out the shopping cart and they get a little bit closer to the building. And just as he can see the lights to the building, Julie's grandmother and grandfather pull up and they're like, hey, we not gonna go on a trip with y'all. Y'all go ahead, keep her safe. We gonna go on down to Canner's, which is a restaurant in Los Angeles, California. They like, we gonna go get like the biggest, greasiest meal we can get and enjoy that. And she's all happy because she's like, you guys are together. And they're like, we love you, but you can't come with us. And she's like, why? I want to go with you guys. Because at this point in time, Harry hasn't really told her anything that's going on. So the grandmother and grandfather are like, no, you got to go with Harry and we're going to go eat and talk. So they pull off and she's like, damn, I wish I could have went with them. I mean, I know what you got planned is really romantic, Harry, but that's my grandma and grandpa. They got back together after like 15 years. So as Harry and Julie approach the building, we see another car with people pull up and they got like the guns, the bullets. These is Landa people. So Harry and Julie, they go into the elevator and she's like, I can't believe they're together, you know? And she says something that's ironic. She was like, they said that they would never talk to each other until the day they die. And Harry like smiles after hearing that a little bit because he's like, damn, the day is the day that we all might die. Once Harry and Julie gets to the rooftop of the Mutual Life building, Harry sees a guy standing by the helicopter. He goes and asks him, he says, hey, are you the pilot? Are we almost ready to go? And the guy's like, I'm not the pilot, dude. I'm just somebody here helping load the cargo. I have no idea where the pilot is. And he sees another guy. He's like, hey man, are you the pilot? Because we're ready to head out. And the guy's like, no, I'm not the pilot. What the hell does Landa expect? She thinks she's gonna find a pilot randomly at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning. She's tripping. She got me out here for no reason and she better have my money. That's all I know is she better have my money. So Harry grabs the guy's hand and takes the money out of his hand. He's like, where can I find a pilot? He's like, I don't know, bro. All the helicopter pilot bars are closed. Harry talks to Julie and he's like, hey, wait here. I'll be back, okay? Don't move. So Harry jumps on the elevator and he heads down. As Harry jumped on the elevator to head down, the two women from earlier brings the guns and the other stuff up and they're like, what the fuck do we need condoms for? We gotta repopulate an entire planet. I mean, we don't need no condoms. Julie is listening to them talk and she's like, huh? Explosion, nuclear weapon, what the hell is he talking about? So she runs to the edge of the building and she yells out Harry's name. Harry turns around and looks right back up at the building because he can hear her calling his name, but he's like, no, I gotta do this. So Harry runs down the street and he sees three people running looking like they're going somewhere. So he starts to follow after them. He follows the three people who end up going into a gym and Harry goes into the gym. The first person he walks into is the receptionist. He's like, hey, do you know any helicopter pilots? It's like, no. So then he walks past another group of people. He's like, hey, do you guys know any helicopter pilots? Can you fly a helicopter? They're like, no. Fuck. Ask somebody else. Hey, you know any helicopter pilots? They like, no. He asks a guy who's on the exercise bike, do you know any helicopter pilots? The guy's like, nah, I don't know nobody. Then he goes into a room where people are doing like exercises, like it's a little exercise class. And he's like, I need to know if anybody knows any helicopter pilots. They kind of ignore him and shit. So then he pulls out the gun and he shoots the radio. He's like, does anybody know any helicopter pilot? It's for a heart transplant. They like all scared and shit. He like, no. So he's like, all right, fine. So he walks out, he walks past this guy and he's like, do you know any helicopter pilots? And as he's walking past the guy's like, yeah, I can fly a helicopter. Linear jets, 747s, all that. The fuck? Harry's like, all right, well, come on, we gotta go. Something's going down and it may wipe out everything, so we gotta go. And the dude like, well, if it's something that heavy, I gotta get somebody who's coming with me.
Hurry! Leslie, come on. We're going.
What the hell's going on?
Any problems?
Nope, I ain't got a problem at all with it. Shit, as long as y'all can fly. Anyway, they head outside and Harry hears what sounds like Julie yelling for helicopter pilots. Harry like, hold up, and he hears her voice again. He's like, shit, that is her. He's like, okay, head to the Mutual Life building and don't leave us. Don't leave us. We're on our way. He pays them the money and then he runs off to go find Julie. He runs and he sees Julie, but she takes off running the other way. So he chases after her and we see a police car come screaming by and Julie
Julie's watching the police car drive into a department store. Julie goes inside to help to find out what's going on, and we find out it's the same police car that Harry was driving earlier with Winston behind the wheel. Winston picks up his sister and he tries to go up the down escalator trying to get away from the police, but he collapsed because he's been shot. He sits there and he's talking to his sister, and his sister's like, is it happening now? Then his sister dies. Julie goes over to Winston and she's like, what's happening? What happened? And he's like, where's the cloud? Where's the gas? It was all supposed to be here. And he says this looking at Harry, and Harry's like, what? Oh man, my lot. And Julie is like, what's he talking about, Harry? What is he talking about? The police are on the outside and they're like, come out, we have you surrounded. Wilson, aka Bubba, he's like, yo, I'm done for anyway. You might as well just take me out of my misery. So Harry aims the gun at Wilson, but then Wilson succumbs to his injuries. Harry and Julie walk off to a different section of the department store. She's like, Harry, what's going on? The guy on top of the building said that you called Landa, that you told Landa. And now this kid is saying you told him that a cloud was coming. What's going on? And Harry's like, oh my God, I caused all this. Everything could be fake. So he reaches up and grabs the light bulb and crushes it in his hand. Julie comes over and she has him sit down and she checks his hand to make sure he's not bleeding, which luckily he's not. And she's like, okay. We go outside and we tell the police we was just walking by. And he's like, okay, all right, let's do that. So she goes out first with her hands up and she's like, I'm just a bystander. Harry starts to follow her. As Harry follows her, we start to see the police are gone. And we see a SWAT officer rappel down and jumps down and starts running away. And we see all the police cars driving away. Then they look around and they start to see the chaos is starting to ensue. People are going crazy and it's starting to become traffic jams, accidents. People are just all over the place. Harry looks at the phone booth where everything started at in front of the diner and he runs across the street to the phone booth. As Harry gets to the phone booth, he picks the phone up and he calls Chip's dad. He says, hey, do you have a son in a missile silo in South Dakota? The guy was like, yeah. How do you know all this? And he's like, well, he wanted you to know that he was sorry. The guy says, is this a fucking joke? And hangs the phone up. Julie grabs Harry's arm and then they start to make a run for the Mutual Life building. As they're running towards the Mutual Life building, Harry sees a guy that looks exactly like their helicopter pilot. He's like, hold on. You take this gun and you head to the Mutual Life building. I'm gonna go see if that's our pilot. She's like, no, I can't do this by myself. But he convinces her to do it. Then Harry runs across the street to the helicopter pilot who's in front of like a TV store, electronics store. Harry turns the guy around and he's like, oh snap, you aren't our pilot. Shit. But he sees a TV playing. So he goes and he busts the glass so that he can hear the audio from the TV. And he sees that all this chaos is ensuing on the TV, that the news people are going crazy. They're showing reports that everything's going crazy. So it turns out that it's actually real. Harry turns around and gets on top of a truck and sees something explode. After he sees something explode, he's like, fuck, I gotta get to the Mutual Life building. So he jumps on top of this car, but it's somebody in the car with a gun, and the dude start letting off on him like, motherfucker, who you think you is standing on top of my car? And this dude is relentless. Harry falls to the ground and starts crawling away, and the dude starts to follow Harry, like shooting other people. Harry crawls into the sewer and the dude follows him like as far as he can, because he a big dude, to the sewer and starts shooting at Harry from the sewer opening. Harry starts to proceed through the tunnels and he's like, all right, I'll go up when I get closer to the building. He goes to climb up the ladder and he sees somebody else get shot. So he's like, nah, I can't go up now. So he goes down to the next opening and he climbs out of the sewer, and luckily he ends up right in the building. After Harry ends up in the building, he goes straight to the elevator and he sees Julie walk past and he's like, Julie. So he reaches out to grab her. He grabs her, they come into the elevator together and they embrace. After they embrace, they're in the elevator and they're talking, and things are ready to pop off. They're ready to go off the top of a ladder like Jeff Hardy and Edge. But they can't, because they get to the top too quick. When they get to the top, they see that the helicopter is gone. So they're like, no, I can't believe it. They left us. We see the guy who was up here originally, and he's talking to himself. He's getting high, drinking alcohol and shit. Like, he was over there messing with that dead body. Not gonna get into that. But he's talking and he's like, damn, Landa was right. And then he starts talking about the wine and he's like, This wine costs all this damn money and it's trash. Then we see a nuclear missile get launched across, and Harry and Julie go into the elevator and kind of crouch down to kind of brace for it. But the guy, he's watching the missile and he says,
Look at that baby go! It's going all the way to Tijuana.
luckily that missile was headed to Tijuana. As that missile's going though, we see the helicopter come in and it's like, yes, okay, they might make it out. They're gonna make it out. They go and get on the helicopter, but the guy, he points at 3 more missiles that's coming. As they're in the helicopter and they start taking off, those 3 missiles hit, and because of the EMP, it knocks the helicopter out. Like there's no power to the helicopter. So the helicopter's just sitting there bobbing in the air and they're like, oh no, we're gonna crash. Everybody brace. So the helicopter crashes right into the tar pits. After the helicopter crashes into the tar pits, Julie, not accepting what's going on, she starts to fight and she's like, no, I gotta get out of here. I gotta get out of here. And Harry's like, no, there's nothing out there. There's no point. And she's like, what do you mean there's no point? We still gotta fight. And Harry's like, there's nothing out there. There's nothing we can do. So Harry holds her and he tells her how Superman can crush a piece of coal into diamond. And if they get a direct hit, that will happen to them. They'll be metamorphosized into a diamond. And she starts to like the idea of that. She's like, we'll be immortal together. Then, bam, the nuke hits them. And that's the end of the movie. Damn, how we feeling? Let me just say, man, this movie came out in the 80s. It didn't use no CGI. Like, it did have some funky parts you could see, like when the police officers got lit on fire, you could see like the glove, and then you could see somebody else was flying the helicopter in the end. You could see that, yeah. This movie, you can really tell, had elements of Chicken Little, and he even said it in the movie. And if you don't know the story of Chicken Little is when I think an acorn fell on a chicken's head and he started running around telling everybody that the sky is falling. This movie has those type elements. But yo, when I watch movies, this is what I look for. Entertainment from beginning to end. Everything that happened in this movie was important. It was no wasted motion. So shout out to Miracle Mile. Shout out to Anthony Edwards, and thank you. Shout out to his wife, Mare. Shout out to the director who also wrote it, Steve DeJant. I might say his name wrong. I apologize. But this movie, man, it was so good. The ending was fucked up though, and I tried to reach out to the director on X, and I was trying to see, like, did the first group of people, you know, Landa and the Fred, if they made it, but he didn't get back to me. So fuck it, 2 tears in a bucket, just like Granny always used to say. But yo, shout out to this movie, man. I do recommend that you go watch this movie if it's possible. It's currently streaming on MGM Plus, Pluto TV for free, and also on Amazon, I think. Yo, check this movie out. And again, I just did a synopsis of the movie. Like, it's some little things that I may have missed, some little funny parts, but I had to condense it for you. So yeah, shout out to Miracle Mile. Shout out to you for watching. Thank you so much for watching this video. And remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with another romance movie. I'm trying to knock one more out before Valentine's Day. And then we're gonna move on to something else. But yeah, thank you so much. Have a good one.